Let's get started here in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Here today, we have Jim Estill, the CEO and owner of Danby Appliances. Jim, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Well, Jim, there's a lot we're going to be able to cover today. One of the areas of focus, I guess, for our audience today will be around your involvement with the Syrian refugees, what you're doing now with the impact of Covid-19, how you're stepping up and being a leader. But first off, Jim, would you mind just giving our audience a basic brief background about your business experience?
Sure. So I'm your basic entrepreneur. I started a business when I was in university from the trunk of my car, and I grew it to a couple billion in sales. I sold it, and then I was retired for 5 years. I moved to New York, and then my dad got sick, so I moved back to Canada, I'm Canadian, that's where I was from. And I sat on the board of this company, Danby Appliances, and the CEO resigned, and I said, I can go in and run Danby Appliances. And so that's what I do today. And along the way, I'd invested in and advised and mentored a number of companies, and one of those was BlackBerry. So I was one of the founding directors of BlackBerry, and as far as YPO goes, I actually was one of the co-founders of the Western Ontario chapter of YPO as well. So,
Jim, you've done a lot. It's pretty incredible. I'm actually interested about this entrepreneurial story, though. Maybe you go into depth a little bit more about how you started this first company.
Well, I was an engineer, and I wanted to design circuit boards. I needed a computer. I got a better deal if I bought two of them. So I bought two and I sold one. And someone else wanted a computer, so I bought another two computers. And someone wanted a printer, and someone wanted some software and memory and disk drive. So next thing you know, I'm buying and selling computer hardware, software, and peripherals. And I was doing that, and I got to the size where I didn't have enough space. I was probably in maybe a 3,000 square foot building. And I had my engineering staff doing custom circuit board design, and I had my sales thing. So I split the engineering company into a different company and sold half of it to the engineers. And that business is still in business today. That company's ConnectTech. And I took my distribution business, and that company became Synix, which is it's a distributor. They do probably 10 billion in sales now, and they're selling to people like Best Buy. They're a silent middleman, selling all the brands that you would know, like Microsoft and Apple and HP and Lexmark and just Epson, you name it, all the brands. They're just the distributor, wholesaler.
Well, it seems like you've been solving a lot of problems, since a young age. Is there an interest that you have of just solving problems and making things better? What really drives you to make these changes?
Well, a lot of it's impatience. So when I see things happening, I can't just not do anything. And usually people don't do things fast enough. So I say, just let me do it. So that's why I tend to jump in and try to solve the world problems.
Well, I'm really excited you're working with Danby right now. I've got a nice little Danby mini fridge that you can't really see. Maybe if you come over to my house, we can share a few items that are in there. I'm sure
perfect.
They're cold. I'm sure they're very cold. They're great appliances. But Jim, like I mentioned in this introduction, what fascinated me and why we were connected to you in the first place is your involvement with employing Syrian refugees. Now, for folks out there listening to this for the first time who are unaware about the Syrian refugee crisis, in 2011, the civil war happened. They had about 26 million people living in Syria at the time. And now I think the United Nations estimates there's around 13.2 million displaced from their homes, both internally and that have also kind of flushed over to neighboring countries like Turkey. So they're living in pop-up shop homes. They've lost their jobs, family identity. Some of the things I want to go into today. But Jim, it's 2011. What were you doing at this time, and what intrigued you most about this crisis?
Well, I didn't really get involved with the Syrian refugee crisis until they became refugees. To be a refugee, they have to be out of the country. So
Okay.
a mass exodus. So around 2015, there was a massive, you saw the television coverage of people taking the rubber dinghies and capsizing and children washing up dead on the beaches and stuff like that. So I thought, well, why doesn't someone do something? And they weren't doing it fast enough. In Canada has a private sponsorship program. So in Canada, you're allowed to sponsor refugees. So, and the other thing, I'm pretty philanthropic, so I donate quite a bit of money. And so I just said, oh, here's my budget. Okay, I've got this much money. How many refugees can I sponsor? I said, oh, I can sponsor 50 refugee families. So I went to say I'd sponsor 50 refugee families, and everyone said, wow, that's a big deal. And so I got tons of press coverage and stuff like that. And I kind of became the poster child of refugee sponsorship. So since then, I've gone on to sponsor well over 100 families, and I have over 500 refugees that I've sponsored that'd be from 2015 to the present. And even to this day, we have refugees arriving every month, and we settle them in my community, Guelph. And it's a whole process. So everyone always says it's the leader that takes the credit. I get the credit, but I don't do the work. It's organized like a business. So I have a director of housing and a director of education, a director of health, director of mentorship. Every family that comes in gets 4 or 5 mentor families, and the mentor families have checklists to set up a bank account, to get the kids tested or ESL tested, to get register them in school, to arrange an apartment or a house, to outfit it with furniture and cutlery, to get them a bus pass, to ride the bus. So it's all the stuff that you need if you settled in a foreign country. What do you need? And then, of course, I did also employ some of them. And we did a program here, which we call Ease into Canada, which is focused around learning English. So we have English teachers that come in and teach English classes. I would offer any refugee a job for 90 days. And then we do resume writing, and we assign a job coach. So it's a way you could get someone who was not necessarily going to be a factory worker to come and learn essentially the culture and get their English a little bit better. And then we help them try to move on and end up with another better job that's more suited to who they are.
So Jim, what's fascinating when we get people such as yourself on the show, it's interesting to me, like why incorporate this into your business? And have you seen any positive benefits that have come from this? And as well, you mentioned this as a philanthropic move. Do you consider this philanthropy, or do you consider this like a socially responsible business model?
Oh, so when I first brought in the refugees, I was not planning on employing any of them. And the reason I wasn't going to employ anyone, I didn't want people to think I was doing it to employ slave labor in my factories. But what happened is I'd bring people in and I'd refer them to my other YPO buddies and say, oh, here, I've got this new refugee here. And it often wouldn't work because they weren't quite job ready. Among other things, in the first 90 days you're in a new country, you actually miss quite a bit of work, because you have to go get a medical, and you probably haven't been to a dentist in 5 years, and you have to register the kids in school, and you can't get a bus pass on the weekend because that's government run, and you have to set up a bank account. And so you have all of these appointments that happen. And if I sent you an employee and all of a sudden they're missing a bunch of work for registering their kids in school, and then there's also some cultural things that are different. I mean, one of the obvious ones is I think with almost every person, we had to have a little conversation that when your shift starts at 8, that means you're here at 8, and 8:45 is not 8. 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock. And because in Syria, the time clock was just a little different. One of the guys started a sock store in the mall downtown, and the mall owner calls me and says, 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning, the mall opens at 10. They haven't opened the store. I said to him, why didn't you open the store? Oh, no one ever comes in that early. Because it's just a more casual approach to time than what we have in North America. So right. Those are the little cultural things. And some of them are bigger. Actually, the same sock store, it's you go in there and he's putting price tags on the socks, $20 a pair. And I said, you're not going to sell them for 20. Oh yeah, they can talk me down to $4. Well, yeah. In Canada, if it says $20, I think that's what price. I don't talk down the price.
Exactly. Well, it's got to be eye-opening for you to experience people from different cultures. I mean, I'm sure you've impacted these people, but how have these people impacted you?
Well, I have really gained a lot from this. This has been the philanthropic thing that has changed me the most, I think. One thing I did is I learned the secret to happiness. And the secret to happiness is being grateful for what you have, not ungrateful for what you've lost, or ungrateful for what other people have.
Mm.
And I have always been practiced gratitude, but I'm telling you, when you hear some of the stories, you just don't realize how good our life is. Like, you are not going to have to worry to go home and your house is bombed, and you're not going to get the call right now that your brother just got killed. And I mean, I had stories of people who ran their life pretty well. Oh yeah, I was a teacher. I socked away. I bought 12 apartment buildings. That's what I was going to retire on. Oh yeah, and then they aren't any longer. And oh, so do you get any money for? Oh no, I have my suitcase. That's what I have. Well,
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, my best friend's parents are refugees as well, and they're just normal people, obviously. But yeah, they have way different norms and different experiences, and the stories that they tell me from the Middle East are crazy. I mean, we've had a few companies come on from MENA, from the Middle East, Northern Africa. But it's interesting when you say that about the jobs and like the expectations, because there's like the lowest level of employment in the world is like over there, and I think that you have a lower probability of getting a job if you have a college degree versus a high school degree there. So it's just a lot different over there. I'm sure. I've never been. Have you been over there?
No, actually, I've never been to Syria. I've been to Morocco a couple of times, but I have not spent much time in the Middle East. But the other thing is they're not as safety conscious as we are in North America. Like we have a factory, so you have to wear steel-toe shoes. Or
oh, okay.
The guy shows up in flip-flops. You can't have flip-flops in the factory. Oh, don't worry about it. Cut my toe off. It's my problem. Don't you worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, in Canada, no, I'll end up going to jail if you cut your toe off here.
Exactly. So, well, you were just mentioning, you found the key to happiness, being gracious and showing gratitude. How has something like that influenced your business decisions, your overall happiness, your approach to the day to day?
I mean, I realized that I can be happy with very little, and it's the little things that can make me happy. One of the things I've always said is health trumps wealth. And so I'm a health guy. I want to be healthy, but in life, it's all about being grateful, and it's all about the little things.
So now we're in a time when another crisis has hit. The Covid-19, the disease caused from the coronavirus, has stifled business, the economy, slowed things down a little bit. Forced many people to start working remotely, not controlling people over, a direct personal connection. What have you done? What has Danby Appliances done to adjust to this crisis?
Well, we've done the same thing as other companies, the social distancing. We've moved equipment further apart. We, separate people more on the lines. All the office staff are really working at home. And so that's definitely different. But the problem is we make physical things. And when you have physical things, you can't exactly be a forklift driver at home because you need to move some goods, right? The other thing we did is we redeployed our whole engineering and design team to design a ventilator, because there's a massive shortage of ventilators right now. And we're redoing one of our assembly lines to make ventilators. And we're trying to solve that problem. And we might be unsuccessful. And we don't make medical equipment. So this is not what we do. And we're collaborating with a lot of other companies, a lot of YPOers. And I don't care whether we actually make them. I don't care whether it's our design. I don't care. I just think that I don't want a situation to happen in North America like has happened in Italy, where people are dying in the gurney in the hall because they don't have a ventilator. And what we're being told by the medical experts is this is going to be a problem if we don't get them. So I feel that we're racing against time to make these happen. And at the end of the day, it could be it could be nothing. by the time this is aired, you'll probably know more about what happened. But I liken it to put a bunch of sandbags out around my house, thinking it might be a flood, and then there's no flood. Well, I'm not that much further behind that I got a bunch of sandbags out. But if there is a flood, I'm a lot better off if I've got my sandbags out than not.
Jim, that's an interesting point. In business school, they don't prepare you for situations like this. They don't say go do something that go into a different industry that you've never been in before, where you might lose some money on. To you, why do something like this? And are you worried about losing money in something like this?
Well, of course, of course, it costs a lot of money. It costs money, absolutely, but it's another save the world thing. So I'm trying to save the world, and it's a race, and real lives are at stake. If we do this right, we can save people, and if we do it wrong, we won't save people. And one of the things I've always said, I don't want to die and say I stood by and did nothing. And I feel that our government is not doing enough. Our government is not, and many other companies are standing by and saying, well, wait a minute, I need to get the order. Oh, I need to, and I'm just saying, no, we're just building these things. And if we may end up giving them to the hospitals, it's not the other way around, where if I was doing it for profit with selling bar fridges or freezers, I would do it differently, where I say, okay, I've got an order for 100,000 pieces, I'll build 100,000 pieces. It's not like I would say, oh yeah, I just go madly and build a whole bunch, and maybe at the end of the day I have to they could end up getting thrown in the dumpster, or they could end up getting given away. But this could be life and death. This I believe will mark our generation. We will be a generation of germophobes. Business will change after this. I think we can say to our grandchildren, when I was growing up, we used to shake hands with people. What's shaking hands? It's like, I think it's going to be a little different.
Man, that's some big thinking right there. Yeah, the guest we had on the show yesterday called this the Great Reset. It's a great time for business leaders to think forward and think about how they can change things from the day to day. Now, you just mentioned a little tidbit in there. You said public servants aren't really doing enough. Do you feel like the business community, who are a group of private servants, have an obligation to step up in a time like this?
Well, I actually believe that private business can lead way better than government can lead. So I believe that businesses can solve a lot because we know how to organize. I mean, even my refugee project, I had 800 volunteers. I say to people, well, if you have 800 employees, you can run a company, you can run 800 volunteers. It's the same thing. It's no different, but we're way better equipped to do that, because you know who was looking after the refugees when I was bringing them in? Mostly churches, synagogues, and they just don't know how to scale. They don't know how to do things en masse, and that a normal business person does. And the same thing is true of these ventilators. Ventilators, we need to get FDA approval. Oh yeah, that's going to take 2 years. It's not taking me 2 years. You're getting the problems in 2 weeks. We're going to get this done. It's not, I don't take no for an answer. They're going to say, hey, wait a minute, you're not medically certified. Yeah, you're right, I'm not. We're going to figure out how to get it done, right?
Exactly. And that's what we're finding a lot with these business communities. They're intentionally taking on these problems to scale the funding, to scale the impact, and it's all the same thing. Now, have you found any remedies, any secrets, any similarities between some of the business partners in your communities who are also taking on these initiatives?
Oh, I found a lot of helpful businesses that are willing to help. One of my things I learned from doing my refugee project was I ask. And usually if you ask, people will help. And if they don't help, that's fine. You can always drive on. But I think people are inspired when I tell them I'm going to do it and I'm doing my part. Then they kind of they just need the push to do their part. Matter of fact, the companies I'm working with are way better equipped to do this stuff. And I use they're way better, because what do we make? We make bar fridges. It's a different animal than a ventilator.
Jim, do you see this? I know I've asked a similar question to this, but do you see this as a trade-off? Do you see your involvement in the refugee crisis or this now new with COVID-19? Do you think you will see returns from initiatives like these that incorporate more stakeholders?
Oh, so I actually believe when you do good, you shouldn't be sitting there saying, okay, this is the returns I'm going to get. However, I will say from the refugee project, particularly, there was some unintended returns. One of them was I got a massive amount of press. So I was on BBC and CBC and CBS and you name it. I had television coverage. I didn't measure how much that's worth, but it was worth millions of dollars. Many people saw the name Danby and saw my name. That was an unintended consequence. I had no idea I'd get that much press. One other unintended consequence was I inspired a lot of my millennials or a lot of my employees. So a lot of the employees, and I didn't do it to say, oh, I'm going to inspire them, but these people will come in on Sunday because we're solving the world problem, where they're not coming in on Sunday because they want to make another 10,000 freezers. I mean, I may think that's inspirational, but they don't think this is inspirational. But when you're doing it to save the world. So those are two positive unintended consequences. One negative unintended consequence is I did get flamed, and some people think that I'm bringing in terrorists, and I fear terrorists just like anybody else. And so there's a little bit of that Islamophobia and a little you get a little bit of that, but maybe that makes me stronger anyways for people to speak, tell me that I'm that I shouldn't be doing it. What can I say?
There's no doubt about it. So, Jim, I mean, you've done a lot of work with this crisis in Syria. You've done a lot. You're pursuing more efforts with COVID-19 now. What are the comparisons between the two?
I mean, one comparison is I didn't think that governments were doing things fast enough and entrepreneurially enough. So I'm doing things very entrepreneurially, which is not in the government nature. And that's a similarity. One difference is, I mean, it was a crisis when I was bringing in the refugees, but I was bringing in the refugees usually from refugee camps, or they were not in a battlefield. So there wasn't quite the sense of urgency to bring people in. I mean, you weren't living in good conditions, but you weren't dying in the streets. Where this COVID race right now is a race. Like we are like, it's going to peak. How high is the peak? When does it peak? I mean, I worry it's not only about the ventilators, who's going to run the ventilators, and it could be very nasty.
Yeah, what's going through your head right now for the people that have to be on the day-to-day jobs?
That's the other thing I do is I tend to solve something that I think I can solve. Because if I try to solve the whole world, it gets too burdensome. I mean, really what I should do is on the refugee thing, I should have gone to Greece, and there's 1 million refugees there. And, but that's too big. I should have solved the war. That's the biggest issue. I can't solve that. And even though everyone says, oh, you did a great job. You brought in hundreds of refugees. That's not a very big, that's a tip of the iceberg. I brought in 500 people out of 5 million people that left Syria. Like it's not even like 0.01%. It's nothing.
Yes, but I guess the question is like, what for like the day-to-day workers that are working on manufacturers that need to be in contact with people in your organization? What is racing through your head about how you're going to solve that problem if this continues?
Well, basically we set up a dramatically different hygiene than what we had. So one of my larger facilities, we have 2 lunchrooms. So you're east side or your west side, you're not both. And we even take temperature when people come into the factory. We do the social distancing thing. And we have more hand sanitizer than I've ever seen in my life. We do offer masks, but most people don't choose to wear masks.
Got it.
I think they're a little hot, a little uncomfortable.
You also mentioned that you see this as a philanthropic move. If I'm going to incorporate something like this, it's not, the interest isn't to make money on this. Do you think there can be a marriage between the two where you could also have the intention to solve the world's biggest problems while also making more money than you were beforehand?
I think in some cases you're absolutely right. Right now on the ventilator project, I'm not approaching it that way because that way tends to slow it down. But I did start a company here called ShipperBee. ShipperBee is a courier company that saves 73.1% of the greenhouse gas per parcel ship. So ShipperBee, if ShipperBee is wildly successful, that's a lot of greenhouse gas. We ship a million or 10 million or 100 million parcels, saving 73% of the greenhouse gas. And that's a company that has a greater good for and can succeed and make money at the same time.
Now, what about robotics and manufacturing? We've been talking about the future of work a little bit. How do you see the involvement of robotics, automation impacting your industry, as well as let's tie this into COVID-19 with being more remote? And you said this is going to have a long-lasting impact on people. Where do you see the future of work going for Danby?
Well, everything was already heading to robotics. So everything was heading to robotics, but interestingly enough, I actually am not sure that that will accelerate a lot. You could say it would accelerate a lot because you don't have, the human-to-human contact. But partly what was driving robotics was labor. You couldn't hire people. This COVID crisis means you can hire people. Like if I put a sign out front saying now hiring unskilled labor, I'd get 500 applications for one little tiny sign. Where it was literally 2 months ago, you'd have to put a big sign. It would have to say signing bonus, and we pay more than everybody else, and you had to really promote, because we had in our community we had almost full employment, especially at the blue collar level. Not that I class this, but those are the jobs that were the most difficult to fill. And that's the Syrians. What I found is that was one reason why we didn't have much resentment in our community, because they're not actually taking someone's job, because nobody wants to be in construction. Nobody wants to work in landscaping. Nobody wants to work in snow removal. Nobody wants to work in factories. Nobody wants to work in the auto shop and stuff like that. So blue collar jobs in Guelph, there was an unlimited number. That has just changed overnight. And I don't know how soon that's going to come back. It could come back, but it might change overnight. I mean, among other things, all the hospitality, the restaurants, the bars, that's a lot of fairly low skilled people that are now thinking, wow, a factory job would be pretty stable.
Stable indeed. So like when you offer them a job during a time of crisis, do you feel like they're more loyal to the company and that you'll retain these employees longer?
Yes. Now we were only hiring people for 90 days, and it was 90 days and out. So it's 90 days and do resume writing, figure out what job they're better at. They could apply for jobs internally. So definitely some of them stayed. And those that stayed are very, very loyal. Absolutely. Very loyal, very hardworking, because they felt that they were being, that I helped them come to Canada and to some extent save them, right?
Jim, seems like you've been dealing with a lot of challenges, a lot of problems throughout your entire life. What's the most difficult decision you've had to make?
Well, for me, the most difficult decision is always around people, because I tend to like everybody and think the best of everybody, but sometimes you just simply can't keep everybody and whatnot. And this COVID crisis is a perfect example. Danby has a very high market share in hospitality, in the Marriott and Holiday Inn and the hotels. Do you think they're going to be ordering a lot more bar fridges? I'm not sure they will. So that part of our business is likely to decline, and that means I'll likely have to make some difficult people decisions.
Now, when a crisis like this hits, you said the business community has been very helpful in terms of reaching out and doing initiatives like this. But is there something missing? Is there a protocol missing? Is there a stance to a unifying mission that's missing? Is there something to you, Jim, that's missing when a crisis like this occurs?
Well, what I find in businesses are economic beings. Businesses are set up generally to make money for the owners. That's how they're set up. and that tends to be what business owners focus on. They don't tend to focus on social good. Can you change that? To say you're going to save the world, it doesn't resonate with most people. Say you're going to make a lot of money, that resonates with people. So your previous idea of saying what's a business you can do and make money while you're saving the world, those are the ones that have the greatest leverage. At the same time, we have a responsibility as business people to make our world better, and we actually do want it better. You actually don't want all of the wealth accumulated in a very tiny number of people who have to drive around in bulletproof cars with razor wire around our apartments because there's such a divide between the rich and the poor. And we actually don't want social unrest. We want social stability. So that provides safety, but not everybody understands that.
Well, Jim, do you think you'd be making the same decisions if you were a publicly traded company?
No, I don't think I could. No, I couldn't. My previous company, I was public, and I ran that public company after I got sold to one. No, when you're a public company, you have a duty to your shareholders. And so, when I first started doing the refugee project, I was an employee of Danby. So I was on the board, and the CEO resigned. I said, I can come in and run it. And then I was running it, but it was very awkward. I call the owner and say, oh, do you mind if I use Danby trucks? Oh, can I use a piece of Dan? Now, they were very philanthropic, and they allowed me to do it. But then they said they want me to sell the business. I said, great, I'll take the business. Once I own it, it's way better because I can say, I'm going to send one of the Danby trucks to pick up a bunch of furniture, and it's my truck, it's my time, it's my issue versus someone else's. And when you're running a public company, it is someone else's company.
Now, Jim, what's the message then to other leaders listening to this, either in both private or public company, who you want to reach out to and send that message to them during a time like this?
Well, one message I would send, which I think would resonate, that is, often you can get value by doing good. So the example of I don't have to advertise for employees anymore because employees want to work here. I don't, and I have a more inspired workforce because people want to work. I got a ton of press for free. Someone else has to pay for advertising. I didn't have to pay for advertising. So these were unintended consequences. And the more good you do in your world and your community, the more it protects you, so to speak, because you are sometimes going to make a mistake. And if you make a mistake and you're thought of as a big bad company, everyone's going to jump all over you on social media, and it's going to amplify. I'm not going to say for sure, but if I make a mistake, and I will make a mistake for sure, people tend to. I've even had very sheepishly worded emails. Oh, I know all the good work you do. I'm really sorry to say I bought this product and it didn't work. Before that, I would get an email saying, I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to put it all over social media, blah, blah, blah. Now they're more gentle. Would you mind replacing it? Would you mind? It's two different ways of approaching it. So you're building your bank account, and that bank account is also big with employees. So and the community, like people just think, oh, are you a good corporate citizen? And it does have a value.
So is this like a risk management tool?
Yeah, it's a risk.
Well?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's absolutely a risk management. Absolutely. Matter of fact, if I left today and didn't lock the front door, people would look after my place, like who don't work here, because they would just feel they don't want Danby to have trouble, right? It's just because that's the way they feel. Because see, the community I'm in is a very small community, population of about 130,000, and so most everybody here would know who we are.
So, Jim, what do you call this type of leadership? What do you call this type of capitalism?
Oh, I don't have any really genius word for it. Part of it is it's almost a FU capitalism. And I built my business. I sold my business for a lot of money. I don't need to work. I was retired and said, no, I like working. I don't like being the gardener. So then when I come back, I really do what I want to do. I wouldn't even do this interview if I didn't want to do it. Like if I didn't feel like doing it, I would say, no, I'm not doing it. And that's the same thing when I choose to help. It's like, I don't really care if you don't like my refugee project. Like, okay, don't buy my product, right?
Interesting. Interesting. An FU type. So that's a mentality though. That's not a type of business model or a capitalistic state. So are you saying it's a leadership mentality that maybe you have that's different now than what you
I think
acquired in
that would be a
business?
leadership mentality. I guess the leadership style is I have a propensity for action.
Mm,
So I tend to take action. And in some cases that, I'm an early mover in a lot of areas. And I'm not only early mover in trying to save the world initiatives, I'm early mover. I like to think I'm early mover even in business. I mean, Danby Appliances is an old fashioned appliance company making fridges and freezers and wine coolers. And I came in here and said, oh, well, we make big boxes. So let's make a delivery box. So we made a box that sits on your front porch that sends you an email or text that say you've got a 3-pound parcel, so you don't get your parcel stolen from FedEx or UPS. That's just changing the frame of who we are. We make big boxes, not just that we're an appliance company. And so I tend to be early or a fast entrepreneur. And that comes from being the tech background. So I take the tech background into smokestack industry, and that's what I'm doing here.
Jim, a lot of leaders, they're really busy. They've got a couple of things written on their desk right now. What are the 3 or 4 things that are on your desk that you want to take care of in these upcoming weeks?
Well, interesting you say that, because one of my management techniques, I have a to-do list this long, but every day I write down 3 things that I want to accomplish. We have just started actively working at home. And so my top priority is to make sure that my culture and communication survives, because I'm an old time guy that I kind of like walking to the next office and seeing someone. And so we're having to get good at video and get good at remote and get good at communicating. And that is top of mind to me, because if we're not efficient and everybody says, oh yeah, I'm working home, that means it's a staycation, then our competitors are going to eat our lunch. And right now, because we're in the heat of COVID, I'm thinking, what does a post-COVID world look like? What's post-pandemic look like? And there will be changes. There may be less hotels where we sell, but there'll be more home offices. So what do you want for a home office? Oh, you probably need a Danby bar fridge for a home office. There may be less vacations to the Caribbean, in which case, oh, I may need a wine cooler. So and you may do more home entertaining rather than me say, oh yes, let's go out and get a glass of wine. It's like, come on over and sit on my deck and enjoy a glass of wine, because we don't want to go out to the busy bar where we might have communicable diseases. So I think I think a lot about what's post-pandemic and what's not. Danby, we have a Danby Health, which is a health-rated refrigerator with some antimicrobial handles and stuff like that. I wonder if we'll just be putting those on regular wine coolers at some point, because everyone's germ sensitive.
Jim, I work remotely. Our whole staff, we have like a no office policy, and it's I'm sure like I can only imagine like what your organization's face right now when everyone's going home, especially except for the people that need to be in the manufacturing plant that we talked about earlier. But what percentage do you think will be able to work from home after this crisis kind of dies down? So like, where are you right now? How many do you think will be off? And then do you think this is something where you'll be saving money on, reducing environmental impact? And how do you think your culture will change because of this?
I actually am very hopeful that we will actually become much more a work at home culture. Okay. And I think we could be 30 or 40%. And then that also could give me competitive advantage. I could actually hire someone from a small community that's 2 hours outside the city, where they can have a different lifestyle. They can buy a house for $250,000 as opposed to in the city where you pay $500,000 or $1 million. And so I think it could change your whole workforce if you get good at it. Same time, there's going to be winners and losers. I think there's going to be the people who worked great in the office. They may not be the ones that work great when they get home. And there are some that are going to be shining stars when they work at home. And I've seen that. I have some people, they work at home, and I almost have to tell them, look, get off the email. It's 10:30 at night. Like, go to bed. You should, or go watch television. Don't. So some people approach it that way. There is still some people that approach this as a staycation. And as I said to my management team, there will be some people who are staycationing for other companies, not mine. Um, but that's an interesting change of dynamic, and I think that's a permanent change in business, and it will be interesting. The environmental savings and the time savings is pretty big. So even if you live in this little tiny community, everybody has a 15-minute commute each way. That's half an hour. Many people have a 45-minute commute each way. That's an hour and a half. Give half the time to the company and take half the time. It's a lot of value, right?
Interesting times. I'm really excited to kind of see how this all unfolds. But I already asked you about the three things on your desk today. But when this protocol to do social distancing, to not go in a setting of more than 10 people, came into play, what was the message to your management team?
Message to the management team is we've got to change our style. I even to this day, I send a daily email to all my staff with my observations of the world and tips for working at home. Be a constant learning organization, working on culture. So mostly the fear and the discussion was around our culture and making sure that we can win in a work at home culture. And I was really skeptical. I was very worried because I'm old school. And the people I loved the most were the ones that were in here at 7 a.m. and didn't leave till 7 p.m. Now I'm learning that maybe I don't have to love just those people. I can love other people too.
That's funny. Well, it's interesting how things change. But Jim, we've had a great conversation today. Learned a lot. There's been a nice comparison between what you've done, in 2015 to kind of what's happening now. Your mentality, your leadership mentality, to how you approach business, how you approach problems, and all in between. It's been a very healthy discussion. But encompassing all of this, bringing this full circle, Jim, the last question I have for you today is, what is your definition of a real leader?
So a real leader is someone who goes in the right direction, unlike a manager who goes efficiently in that direction. A leadership is about effectiveness. Management is about efficiency. And often we get the two confused. Leadership is about leading people. Management is about managing people. It's the difference between pulling and pushing, in my opinion.
Jim, well put, beautifully put. I think that ties into a lot of the different topics you mentioned today as well, in terms of direction and doing the right thing, and kind of just talking about your entire life. I think it was just a real cool, inclusive story. So appreciate you coming on the Real Leaders podcast, Jim. For Jim Estill, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, folks, and always keep it real. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Kevin.